All day long, sitting in the courtyard on a bench, were the four idiotic children of the Mazzini Ferraz couple. Their tongues hung between their lips, their eyes rolled and turned with their mouths gaping open. The courtyard was made of dirt, enclosed on the west by a brick fence. The bench stood parallel to it, 5 meters away. There they remained, perfectly still, their eyes fixed on the bricks. When the sun sank behind the fence, the idiots finally became active. At first it was the blinding light that caught their attention. Slowly, their eyes came alive. Then they would laugh, loudly, uncontrollably, swollen with the same eager mirth, staring at the sun with savage delight, as if it were food. Other times, lined up on the bench, they would hum for hours, imitating an electric tram. Sudden loud noises would rattle them out of their paralysis, and then they would run around the courtyard, biting their tongues and bawling as if groaning. But most of the time they were sunk in a gloomy, animal stupor. They spent the entire day on that bench with legs hanging and motionless, soaking their trousers with thick, sticky saliva. The oldest was 12, the youngest was 9. In every aspect, their filthy, helpless appearance, you could see the absolute absence of any motherly care. Yet these four idiots had once been the pride and joy of their parents. 3 months after marrying, Mazzini and Berta redirected their narrow, intense love, husband and wife, wife and husband, toward a much more vital future, a child. What greater happiness could there be for two lovers than that honorable consecration of their affection, free at last from the selfishness of endless mutual love, worse even, because then there were no hopes left for renewal. That is how Mazzini and Berta felt. When their first child arrived, 14 months into marriage, they believed their happiness was complete. The baby grew beautiful and radiant, until the child was a year and a half old. Then, in the 20th month, that night brought horrible convulsions. The next morning, the child did not recognize their parents. The doctor examined the boy with the professional attention that clearly searches for the cause of a sickness in the parents themselves. After a few days, the paralyzed limbs recovered enough to move again, but the intelligence was gone, the soul was gone, even the instinct had vanished entirely. The child remained deeply drooling, limp and hanging forever on his mother's knees, as if dead. "Son, my dear son," Berta sobbed, clinging to that ruined firstborn. With a broken heart, Mazzini went outside with the doctor. "To be honest," the doctor said, "you may be told that this case is lost. He might improve, learn everything that his idiocy allows, but he will never go further." "Yes, yes," Mazzini agreed. "But tell me, do you think it's hereditary?" "As for the father's side," the doctor answered, "I already told you what I thought when I saw your child. As for the mother, there is a lung that doesn't breathe properly. I don't see anything else, but the breathing is a little harsh. Have her examined thoroughly." Overwhelmed with remorse, Mazzini doubled his love for his son, the little idiot who was paying for the excesses of the grandfather. And he also had to console and hold Berta without rest, her spirit wounded at its deepest point by the failure of her young motherhood. As might be expected, the couple poured all their love into hope for another child. A second child was born, and this time health returned and laughter lit up their future again, extinguished no more. But at 10 months and 8 days, the convulsions of the firstborn returned, and the next day the child was idiotic again. This time the parents fell into despair, then into something worse. Their blood, their love above all felt cursed. He was 28, she was 22. All their passionate tenderness still could not create even a single atom of normal life. They no longer asked for beauty or intelligence, like they had for the firstborn. All they wanted was a child, any child, like everyone else. From this new disaster came new flares of wounded love, a mad desire to redeem, once and for all, the holiness of their tenderness. Twins were born, and point by point, the The same process repeated itself with the two older ones. Yet above all their immense bitterness, Mazzini and Berta felt deep compassion for their 4 children. They had to drag them out of the limbo of the deepest animality. Not just their souls, but their instinct itself had been abolished. The children did not know how to swallow, did not know how to shift position, and not even how to sit. Eventually they learned to walk, but they collided with everything because they didn't even notice obstacles. When they were washed, they moaned until their faces turned bloody. They only seemed to brighten when eating, when they saw bright colors or heard thunder. Then they would laugh with their mouths spilling out tongues and rivers of saliva, radiant with bestial frenzy. They did have a limited ability to imitate, but nothing more could be achieved. With the twins, it seemed the terrifying line of descendants had finally ended. But after 3 years, they desired another child intensely again, trusting that the long time that had passed might have calmed fate. Their hopes were not fulfilled, and in that desperate craving, made sharper by repeated failure, they both soured. Until then, each had carried their share of the misery of their children. But the hopelessness of redemption, when 4 beasts had been born from them, forced out a harsh need to blame the other. That impulse belonged specifically to inferior hearts. It began with changes in pronouns, your children, as if each were denying responsibility. And because the insult struck deeper than words alone, the atmosphere grew thick and poisonous. One night, with his hands washed and as if he had just returned from nowhere, Mazzini said, "It seems to me the boys could be cleaner." Berta kept reading, as if she had not heard. "It's the first time," she replied after a while, "that you've been uneasy about the state of your children." Mazzini turned his face slightly toward her, forcing a smile. "Our children, I suppose." "Well," she said, lifting her eyes, "our children." This time Mazzini spoke clearly. "You're not going to say that it's my fault, are you?" "Oh, no," Berta said, very pale. "But I suppose it isn't mine either." "Of course not," he murmured. "Of course not," she repeated. "That if someone is to blame," he said, "it isn't me. Understand that, that's what I wanted to say." He looked at her a moment, with brutal desire to insult her. "Leave it," he articulated, finally wiping his hands again, as if wiping away the issue itself. "As you like," Berta replied. And so it was. The first clash, and then others followed. Inevitably, reconciliation came. Each time more frantic, fueled by double passion and a kind of madness, always chasing another child as if it could make everything right. A daughter was born. They lived 2 years with their hearts perpetually clenched, always waiting for another catastrophe. Nothing happened. The parents put all their tenderness into her. Their affection pushed her to the farthest limits of pampering and bad upbringing. Even in later days, Berta still cared for the children at birth, little Bertita, forgetting almost everything else. Even the memory of the others horrified her, like something atrocious that they had forced her to endure. Mazzini felt the same, though less intensely. Not because peace had finally settled into their souls, but because any small illness of their daughter now spilled out old resentments of their ruined line, driven by the terror of losing her. They had accumulated it all, and they had had more than enough time for the cup never to tip, so that at the slightest contact the poison would spill out. From the first poisoned argument, respect was already gone. And if there is one thing a man is cruelly tricked into believing, it is when he has already begun humiliating a person completely. Before, they had still held back, because there had been no success. Now that a daughter had arrived, each took it as proof of their own side, and the shame felt even worse. Each blamed the other for forcing those 4 miserable offspring into existence. With these feelings, the 4 older children could no longer receive any real affection. The servant dressed them, fed them, laid them down, clearly brutal in her handling. She hardly ever washed them. Most of the day they sat in front of the fence, abandoned, deprived of even the distant touch of kindness. In this way, Bertita reached 4 years old. That night, after being given sweets that their parents absolutely could not refuse her, she got a chill and a fever. The fear that she might die, or become idiotic like the others, reopened the old wound. They had not spoken for 3 hours. The reason, as almost always, was the heavy steps of Mazzini. "My God," Berta said, irritated, "can't you walk more slowly? How many times have I told you?" "Well, it slipped my mind. It's over. I'm not doing it on purpose." She smiled at her, as if to say, "I don't believe you." "I don't, never." "You'd believed it if it were me," Berta said. "And you'd believed it about me too." "What?" "I heard you say something." "I don't know what you said," she continued, "but I swear I'd rather have anything than a father like the one you've had." Mazzini turned pale. Finally, between clenched teeth, he whispered, "Viper. You've finally said what you wanted." "Yes," she said, "Viper. But I've had healthy parents, you hear me? Healthy. My father didn't die of madness. I would have had children like everyone else's." "Those children are yours," Mazzini shot back. "All 4 of them are yours." "Viper breath," he exploded again. "That's what I said. That's what I mean. Go ask the doctor. Ask who is most to blame for the meningitis that took your children. Your father, or your badly fed lungs?" "Viper." They continued, each time with more violence, until a sound like a sob from Bertita sealed their mouths at once. At 1 in the morning, the mild indigestion had passed. And as happens, tragically, in all young marriages that have loved intensely, reconciliation came at least once, more lavish, because the wounds had been more sharp. The next morning was splendid. While Berta washed, she coughed up blood. The emotions and the bad night must have been the cause, without doubt. Mazzini held her in his arms for a long time. She cried desperately, but neither of them dared say a word. At 10 o'clock they decided to go out after breakfast. They had little time, so they ordered the servant to kill a chicken. The radiant day pulled them away from their bench. While the servant slit the chicken in the kitchen, slowly bleeding it out, Berta had learned from her mother a good way to keep meat fresh, and she thought she felt something like breathing behind it, something wrong, something alive. She turned. There were the 4 idiots, their shoulders pressed together. They stared in stunned silence at the operation. "Red, Red," the servant called. "Madam, the children are here in the kitchen." Berta hurried over, horrified. She never wanted them in that room. Even in these hours of full forgiveness and forgetting, when happiness felt recently regained, the sight could not be avoided. The more intense her raptures of love for her husband and daughter, the more irritable her humor became toward the monsters. "Get them out, Maria. Push them out, push them." The 4 poor beasts were shoved and jostled, thrown back onto their bench. After lunch, they all went out. The servant went to Buenos Aires. The couple went walking among the country properties. As the sun fell, they returned. Berta wanted to greet a moment with their neighbors across the street. Their daughter slipped away immediately to go home. Meanwhile, the idiots had not moved all day from their bench. The sun had already passed behind the fence. It was sinking. Still, they stared at the bricks, more inert than ever. Then something moved between their gaze and the fence. Their sister, tired of having parent duties for hours, wanted to observe for herself. Standing by the fence, she watched the top of the brick wall with thoughtful eyes. She wanted to climb, that was undeniable. At last she found an old, broken chair, though it still wasn't enough. So she went to a kerosene box. Her instinct for positioning made her place it upright, and by doing so she succeeded. The 4 idiots watched, indifferent at first, as their sister patiently managed to balance, and then, on tiptoe, rested her throat against the top of the fence, bracing it with her drawn, tense hands. They saw her look around and search for a way to lift herself higher, foot probing for support. But the monster's gaze had changed. A single stubborn light was fixed in their pupils. They did not look away from her. As a growing sensation of savage hunger began to move along every line of their faces, the four of them advanced toward the fence. The little girl, having managed to place her foot, was already mounting, ready to straddle the top, and was about to fall to the other side. Surely she felt as if she were being caught by the leg. The sight of the 8 eyes nailed to her with unwavering focus frightened her. "Let me go, let go of me," she cried, kicking the leg that held her. But she was drawn forward. "Mom, Mom, Dad," she begged urgently, trying one last time to grab the edge. But she felt herself ripped away, and she fell. "Mom," she could not even finish the word. One of them pressed her neck, tightening her hair as if it were feathers. The others dragged her by a single leg, straight into the kitchen, the very place where that morning the chicken had been bled out, held tightly while life was taken away second by second. Across the way, in the house, Mazzini thought he heard his daughter's voice. "I think she's calling you," he said to Berta. They listened, alarmed, but heard nothing more. Still, a moment later, they left their neighbors behind. While Berta was taking off her hat, Mazzini walked quickly into the courtyard. "Bertita," he called. No answer. "Bertita," he called again, his voice rising, already disturbed. The silence was so funereal for his always frightened heart that his back went cold with a horrible premonition. My daughter," he cried, running to the far end. But as he passed the kitchen, Mazzini, death pale, stepped in front of her and stopped her. "Don't go in, don't go in." Berta managed to see the floor flooded with blood. She threw her arms over her head and sank along it, down the length of the stain, with a hoarse, broken sigh.